Hey guys, today we are making a box of delicious chocolate truffles from scratch. First, melt the dark chocolate. And meanwhile, prepare the parchment paper to set up in the cake ring or mold. Today I'm using a 15 centimeter square ring, but if you don't have the same size, that's totally fine. You can use a similar size or whatever you have at home. And as an option, coat a thin layer of butter so that the paper sticks better. Now, the melted chocolate should be about 45 to 50 Celsius, which is 113 to 122 Fahrenheit, and the heavy cream should be warmed up to about 70 to 80 Celsius, which is 158 to 176 Fahrenheit. And add about 1/3 of the heavy cream and mix. Mix gradually from the center toward the edge until everything looks even and nice and smooth. And add about half of the heavy cream and repeat the same process. Finally, add the last and again repeat the same process. And add honey and add butter. Make sure that your butter is very soft so that it can blend easily. When you add butter, the ganache should be about 37 to 39 Celsius because when the butter gets heated too much, it feels grainy after it's cooled down. By melting it with as low temperature as possible, you can maintain the smooth texture. And as option, mixing with a hand blender at the very end really helps to create extra smooth ganache. And hold the ring really well and toss sometimes. Toss gently to remove some air bubbles in it. And wrap it tightly so that it's not going to get any moisture damage in the fridge. And chill in the fridge until it gets firm completely. And now it's completely set. We're going to cut it. Level out the edge if it's not flat. And spread a very thin layer of tempered chocolate. So I'm going to show you how to temper chocolate later, but this is going to be the bottom of the chocolate truffles, and by doing this, it's going to be so much easier for you to scoop up the ganache when you are coating the chocolate all around. So even though it's extra work, I highly recommend doing this for less sweat. Now flip the ganache. And we're gonna cut it into each pieces. I am dividing it into 25 pieces. And I'm gonna make 6 different shapes. When you cut the ganache with cookie cutters, make sure to cut through the thin layer of chocolate on the very bottom. Today I used heart and circle cookie cutters. You can do any shapes you like. And when you cut the ganache with a knife, warm up your knife each time you cut it so that you can cut straight and beautifully. I cut off one side a little bit to make the rectangle shape, and also squares and octagon by cutting off the corner edges. Using the leftover scraps, you can make ball shapes. Chill them in the fridge first and roll it again to create more smooth surface. And that's it. All the 6 shapes are ready. Okay, now let's temper chocolate to coat the ganache. First, melt about 3/4 of the whole chocolate. Today I'm going to use both dark chocolate and white chocolate. And then dice the rest. Cut into very, very fine pieces so that they can melt easier. And we're going to start from white chocolate. Melt the white chocolate until it reaches to 40 to 45 Celsius, which is 104 to 113 Fahrenheit. And add the diced chocolate and mix. Don't add all of it at once. Save just a little bit just in case you need to add more. And the goal is by the time all the white chocolate is melted, it cool down to between 26 to 28 Celsius. And while you're working on the chocolate, try not to go over or under the temperatures. But by the time you reach to those temperature, if the chocolate was still not melted, you can warm it up a little bit with microwave or hot water or hair dryer like today. Today I coated only 6 truffles, 1 ball and 5 hearts, so I didn't use a lot of chocolate. Drop the ganache, push down, and scoop. And this is optional, but blow some cold air on top so that the coating gets nice and thin. Toss to remove some excess chocolate on the side and clean up the bottom with the edge of the ball. I coated some strawberries as well. And cut off any excess chocolate all around the bottom. Okay, so now let's work on the dark chocolate. Melt it with 45 to 50 Celsius, which is 113 to 122 Fahrenheit. And just like how we did with white chocolate, add the diced chocolate and mix. And again, save some just in case you need to add more later. And by the time all the chocolate is melted, the temperature should be between 31 to 32 Celsius. And as an option, in the very end, mix it with hand blender to make sure that everything is even and smooth and to remove some air bubbles. To check if the tempering is done correctly, drop the chocolate onto anywhere you like. At room temperature, the chocolate should get set within a few minutes. If you don't have a special fork for chocolate truffles, you can use a regular fork. To make the temperature even, mix the chocolate every time or at least every few times. And as you coat, keep checking the temperature to make sure that the temperature is kept and maintained correctly. It should be between 31 to 32 Celsius, but range is really narrow and I find it difficult to walk between the temperatures. So I usually do between like 30 to 32 Celsius and it works just fine. Melted dark chocolate is thicker than melted white chocolate, and the coating tends to get thicker so easily. So blowing a hairdryer like this really helps to make it thinner, and it creates a very pleasant texture. But just be careful not to blow too much because tempered chocolate shrinks a little bit as it cools down, and if the coating is too thin, it can clack a little bit. So in total, you can make about 30 truffles with 6 designs. Plus, I coated strawberries, just 5 strawberries. So that's something you can do as an option as well. It doesn't have to be the same design or the flavors. You can have fun with however you like for your special box. Okay, so that's it for the coating, and now let's finish up all the decorations that I couldn't catch up, I couldn't finish earlier. When you slice ganache, I recommend to leave it at room temperature for some time before you do it, because when the ganache is really cold, oftentimes it's really difficult to cut straight and beautifully. And this also depends on the percentage of cacao in chocolate. If it's like 50% or 60% or 70%, when the percentage is higher, the firmer the ganache gets. So for example, today I left the ganache for about 15 minutes before I poured the chocolate and flipped and sliced, and it was a good consistency. When you feel the ganache gets a little bit too soft to slice, simply put it back in the fridge sometime and come back. And when you slice, always warm up your knife to cut nicely. And when you use hot water, wipe off any water attached to the knife each time you cut it, because water is a huge enemy for chocolate, especially for chocolate truffles or chocolate bonbons like this. By tempering chocolate, your chocolate gets shinier, more stable, so it doesn't melt at room temperature as easily as without doing tempering, and the chocolate gets nice snap when you eat it. And when you try to coat chocolate with a very small amount of tempered chocolate, the temperature goes down quickly or goes up quickly. If you can, only if you can, I always recommend to use a large amount of chocolate. Today I used 1 kilogram of dark chocolate to coat. That way you can really hold the temperature much easier. If it's properly tempered, you can just pour on a tray and spread it so that you can cut easier. Cut it into a smaller pieces and store in an airtight container, and you can use it again. But of course, make sure that it's clean and nothing else is mixed in. Because the ganache contains heavy cream, I do not recommend to store it at room temperature for a long time. Store in the fridge in an airtight container, especially if it's a homemade chocolate truffles like today. I recommend consuming within 5 days or a week. It is possible to freeze them, but be really careful because it can really get moisture damage. So to minimize that, when you store in the freezer, wrap tightly. Seal the containers. After you take it out from a freezer, don't move it at room temperature because that drastic temperature gap can cause the moisture damage. Move it to a fridge overnight, and from a fridge, move it to a room temperature. If you can get, I highly recommend to use Cupertino chocolate because that's the best type of chocolate. I'll leave the ones I used today in the description box below in case you're interested. But I'm gonna tell you, if you cannot get Cupertino chocolate, just use any chocolate you have. It's not gonna be exactly a same result, but it's still amazing. It's still delicious because it's chocolate. I'll stop right here. If you have any questions, please let me know on the comment section below, and I'll try to answer as many as possible. So that's it for today. Enjoy pastry living, and I'll see you next week. Bye bye.